Hello, boys and girls. It's me, Mrs. Robinson, and I wanted to come on YouTube today to go over another math lesson. We're going to be talking about area and perimeter and what the difference is. So, you ready? Let's begin. So, we're going to use a basic rectangle to explain the basic difference between area and perimeter. Okay, let's start with perimeter. The definition for a perimeter is that it is the distance around an object. So on this paper, I'm going to write another important fact about perimeter is that you are adding up the sides. So after we measure how long this side is, how long this side is, this side, and this side, we're going to add up all the sides. Now I know I did not draw my rectangle perfectly, so I'm just going to guesstimate my measurements. You can use a tape measure, you can use a ruler, or you could also guesstimate what you think measurements would be when building objects, like on pieces of paper or outside or with magnetic strips, whatever you have at home to utilize. So what my guesstimate for this length is, we're gonna put 5 feet. We're going to guesstimate that it is 5 feet long. We're also going to guesstimate that the width of my object is 10 feet long. So for perimeter, we're adding up the sides. Well, if this length is 5 feet, then that means this length is 5 feet. And if this length is 10 feet, then we're going to assume that this length is 10 feet. And because this is a rectangle, we know that two pairs of sides have equal lengths. So that's why I put a 5 over here, because this needs its equal length pair. And for 10 feet, it also needs its equal length pair because it is a rectangle. So if we are adding up all the sides for a perimeter, we could start with our big numbers. We could start with 10, 10, 5, 5. We are going to add them. 10 plus 10 is what? 20. And, ooh, that looks like a 26, but it is a 20. And 5 plus 5 is what? 10. Top of your head, what's 20 plus 10? 30. So the perimeter of this rectangle would be 30 feet. So that's how we're figuring out the perimeter. We are going the distance around the object and we're adding up all the sides. Now let's switch on over to area. The area of an object is the amount of space inside an object. So now we're talking about what's going on in this part of our object. So for area, I'm going to write space inside an object, and I also want to write what type of measurement I'm going to use for figuring out area. For perimeter, we used addition, but for area, it's going to be a different one. We're going to switch over to multiplication. We're going to multiply our length times our width. When trying to figure out area, sometimes you'll have boxes that you can count the units of measurement. So for instance, this would be 5 square units going down. I need 5 boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I would need 10 going across. Sometimes when multiplication gets tough, we have the ability to draw our units of measurement inside our area so that we can figure out the amount of space we have. So we said this is 5 feet going down. I drew 5 square units of a foot going down, and we said this was 10 feet across, so I drew 10 square units going across. So say you couldn't figure out what 10 times 5 was, you could also just count all those dots inside and that would give you your answer. But because I know that 5 times 1 is 5, and 5 times 0 is 0, 5 times 10 is 50. I also could do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. I could also model it by saying these are base 10 blocks, so this is a measurement of 10. You have 5 times equals 50. When we are figuring out area though, we always label it in square feet because like I said, we're dealing with 1 unit of a square foot. So make sure when you're labeling your area, it's always in square feet, where your perimeter you could just write however many feet or inches it is. So I know I threw a lot on you at once, and I know usually we wouldn't teach area and perimeter in the same breath, but because I don't get to be in the classroom with you talking about this, I decided I needed to make a video and teach you so you could practice it. Let's look over at my compare and contrast chart I made about area and perimeter and review one more time what it is before I give you a little fun activity to do. Ready? So let's start with perimeter since that's what we started with on our poster board we just did. A perimeter is the distance around the outside of an object. You add each side, which is the length. So we're using addition, we're adding all the sides. So my example, I have 2 going down, 3 going across, so I have 2 plus 3 plus 2 plus 3. And here's a picture of what I mean by the square measurements. We could draw 2 going down and 3 across. For area is the amount of space inside an object. You would count the square units or the surface, or you could also just multiply the length times the width. Here's an example where I have the same 2 by 3 that I have over here, and I just times 2 times 3, which is 6. There are a few things that area and perimeter have in common. They are both types of measurements. They both use a type of operation. You guys remember what type of operation do we use for perimeter? Show me with your hands. Adding. Okay, for area though, what type of operation do we use? Show me with your hands. Ready? Multiplication. So for perimeter, we're adding. For area, we're multiplying. The last similarity they have is that we are using an object or a shape. I also wrote 2 sentence frames at the bottom of the poster to kind of use as an example when we're comparing and contrasting what type of terminology and vocabulary we should be using. A sentence we could use when comparing 2 objects would be area and perimeter are similar because they both use an operation to measure a shape. A contrasting sentence we could model would be area and perimeter are different because area uses multiplication to measure inside an object, and perimeter uses addition to measure the outside of a shape. So that is just 2 different sentences we could use while we're comparing and contrasting anything. I used it today because I talked about area and perimeter, and I know usually we wouldn't talk about those in the same breath, but like I said, we needed to get things done. So I did, and I wanted to also compare and contrast them so you knew how they were different and why. I have a fun activity I would love for you to go try. If you get bored and would like something to do, you can go measure the area or perimeter of your room or your backyard or your front yard, whatever object or shape you have, measure it and figure out what the area and the perimeter is. Even if you don't have a measuring tool, you can just guesstimate, just like I did today in our lesson. What I'm going to model for you today is what the area and the perimeter of my backyard is. I'm going to use my feet as my guesstimation tool to figure how long and how wide my backyard is. And then I'm going to use an operation, depending on if I'm using perimeter, I'll be adding, area, I'll be multiplying, to figure out my answers. Stay tuned. I hope you enjoyed this area and perimeter lesson. I hope it made sense. It's kind of hard when I don't have people to call on to be like, that was a little confusing. So email me if anything didn't make sense. mrsbrobinson1@gmail.com. You can also email me at brobinson@williamsusd.net. I hope you enjoyed. Bye-bye, Mrs. B. Robinson. Out. Boys and girls, we saw that my backyard was 53 feet long by 18 feet wide. So I'm going to draw that right here. So this is my model of my backyard. Now what we're going to do is let's figure out the perimeter first. For the perimeter, who remembers what operation we need to use? I hope you said addition, because if you did, you're correct. We need to add up our 4 sides of our object. Now, I only have 2 sides I measured. Well, lucky for me, my backyard is a rectangle. So that means that both sides are equal lengths. So I'm going to add a 53 on this side and an 18 on this side just to help me for my perimeter's sake. Now, since we said it's addition, we're going to add up all our sides. These are a lot of big numbers, so I'm going to have to use some mental math. I know that 3 plus 3 is 6, and I also know that 8 plus 8 is 16. Now I need to add 16 plus 6. You can either do that mentally with your fingers, or if you just know that 6 plus 6 is 12, then you know that it's going to be 22. So I'm going to put a 2 on the bottom, and I'm going to carry my 2 on top of my 10s. Now I need to count my 10s. If it helps you to cover up the ones, please do so. It helps me sometimes. We're going to add 5 plus 5, which is 10. Then we have 1, which would be 11, 12, 13, 14. So the perimeter of my backyard is 142 feet. Now let's figure out the area. The area, what operation do I use for area again? Oh, multiplication. So I'm going to put an X. to help me remember. Now, what were the two numbers that I measured again? Well, I said that it was 53 feet long by 18 feet wide. Wow, if you're in 3rd grade or younger, this type of backyard might be too big because we haven't learned how to solve 2-digit by 2-digit numbers yet. But if you're in 4th grade and above, you can solve this. I'm going to go ahead and help my younger kids figure out how to solve these 2 by 2-digit numbers. So my favorite new Common Core way to solve multiplication 2 by 2 is to break it up into a new box. So I hope you can see this. We're going to turn it into like 4 squares. We're going to break our 10s and our 1s on one side and then the 10s and the 1s on the other side. So I'm going to get another color just to make this easier. So I would do 50 plus 3 is 53. And to solve for 18, I would do 10 plus 8. So I'm going to put a 10 and an 8. Now, here's the tricky part. Are you ready? To figure out each box, we are going to solve. Okay, ready? Okay. This is jumping to 4th grade. It's so crazy, but you can do it. So the 3 is going to be in charge of this section, and the 50 is in charge of that section all the way across. The 10 is in charge of the boxes going up, and those two, and the 8 is in charge of the boxes going up for these two. So are you ready? We're going to do 50, because he's in charge of this box, times 10, because he's also in charge of that box. Now we got to figure out the problem for this box. Well, we said 50 is in charge going this way, so I'm going to add 50. And now we're in the 8's territory. So we're not going to put 10 like we did over here because that was 10's territory. We're in 8's territory, so I'm going to put 8. Now we're going to go down to the 3's territory. That was the 50's territory. Now we're going to go to the 3's territory. We're in the 2 bottom boxes. We said we have 3 times something and 3 times something because 3 is in charge of both those boxes. Well, we also said 10 is in charge of these two. So it's going to be 3 times 10. And we said 8 is in charge of these two. So it's going to be 3 times 8. Now we solve. I know that 5 times 1 is 5. Add my 2 zeros. I know that 5 times 8 is 40. Add my 1 0. I know that 3 times 10, ooh, that's easy, 30. And I know that 3 times 8 is 24. See why I'm telling you knowing your math facts is so important? That just made this really, really, really hard problem so much easier because I knew all my math facts like that. Now we got to add up all the sections inside. We have 0, 0, 0, 4 is 4. 0, 0, 3 and 2 is 5. 5 and 4 is 9. Oh my goodness. Our area is 954. Do you remember what we label it? Square feet. And that's how I solved for the area and perimeter of my backyard. That was big. Now, I would say go to your backyard if it's not so big. If it's super, super, super big, you might need your parents' help because you saw how tough it got. Or do your room or do your bathroom. Do a smaller space to practice because this was kind of extreme. Do a smaller space to practice. And then once you feel confident that you get how to do area and perimeter, then bam, let's move on up to that bigger space until you become a master in this measurement system. I have 2 more examples to show with you from drawings I created. Right here, I drew an example of a house. So I drew a picture of a little square house. I said the house was 4 feet long by 6 feet wide. So to solve for my area, I did 4 times 6 was 24. To figure out the perimeter, I know that 4 plus 6 plus 4 plus 6 equals 20. So the perimeter of my beautifully drawn house is 20. Here's an even better example I drew of a fence with some grass. Like you would see in any backyard, you would have the perimeter be your fence, and the grassy plain area is your area inside. So my length is 3 and my width is 5. 3 times 5 is 15, but 3 plus 5 plus 3 plus 5 is 16 feet. So you can always just draw a picture and practice it that way. Good luck. I hope that was helpful. Bye again, even though I already said bye.